Imagine being laughed at by battle-hardened soldiers, mocked by an admiral, and told you didn't belong on the range, until one chilling order changed everything. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story will leave you speechless. The Admiral's hand gripped the Barrett like he owned it, his thick fingers curling around the cold steel, veins bulging as he yanked it toward himself with the smug arrogance of a man who had never been challenged, and for a split second time froze. The world shrank to the space between Kara's heartbeat and the weight of his hand on her rifle. Every insult, every snicker, every whisper of doubt she had endured since stepping on this base detonated inside her like a grenade, and when it blew, it didn't make a sound. It moved, lightning fast. Her body reacted before her mind could shout, "Don't!" before reason could plead for diplomacy. She stepped in with the fluid grace of a predator, her boots whispering against the steel deck, her left hand clamping down on the Admiral's wrist like an iron trap. He smirked. Big mistake. Because the next thing he felt wasn't control. It was pain. White-hot, soul-crushing pain as Kara wrenched his wrist into a brutal lock, pivoted and slammed the thick bone against the unforgiving edge of the rifle frame. There was a sound, sharp, sickening, and final, a crack that cut through the laughter like a bullet through glass. The Admiral's roar tore the sky apart, a raw animal sound that made the bravest men flinch. He staggered back, clutching his mangled wrist, his metals flashing in the sun as if mocking him. For one heartbeat, the range was a painting. Every soldier frozen, mouths open, eyes wide with shock. Then reality slammed back in, hard and merciless. The laughter died in their throats like a candle snuffed in a storm, replaced by silence so thick you could carve it with a knife. Kara didn't move, didn't blink. Her pulse was a war drum, but her face, oh, that face, was carved from stone, cold, ruthless, unyielding. She lowered the rifle back to the bench with the precision of a surgeon setting down a scalpel and spoke, her voice low and sharp enough to draw blood. "Hands off my rifle." 3 words, each one a bullet, and every man on that range took one straight to the gut. No one laughed now. No one dared breathe. The Admiral stumbled to his knees, his good hand clutching his ruined one, eyes blazing with humiliation and something darker, hatred, the kind that eats men alive. Officers surged forward, voices cracking with panic. "Medic! Get a medic!" Boots thundered, radios screamed, but Kara's world had already shifted. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot, but she didn't regret it, not for a heartbeat. Because some lines once crossed can't be uncrossed, and he had crossed the only one that mattered. And then, like fate itself had been watching, waiting for this exact moment, the loudspeaker exploded with a voice that sent ice water through every vein on that range. "Code Black, incoming hostiles. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The sky, once a clear blue canvas, now buzzed with death. Drones, sleek black predatory machines slicing through the clouds, their engines screaming like angry hornets, sunlight glinting off their armored hides. Panic detonated like a bomb. Men dove for cover, weapons clattered, shouts rose into the choking air, but Kara didn't flinch. She didn't move an inch. Because where others saw chaos, she saw clarity. She slid behind the Barrett in one fluid motion, the rifle an extension of her soul, and as the first drone screamed into a dive, she chambered around with a sound that silenced fear itself, a sound that promised death to anything foolish enough to fly into her crosshairs. And then she whispered, so softly it was almost lost to the wind. 6 drones, 6 rounds. Watch and learn. And the world erupted in fire. The first drone broke from formation like a hawk sighting prey, slicing through the sky with a shriek of rotors and a belly full of death. Its undercarriage bristled with twin cannons, barrels spinning to life, spitting a rain of steel that shredded the range deck in a storm of sparks. Men scattered like ants, boots hammering steel, voices cracking with panic as bullets chewed the ground to molten ribbons. But Kara didn't move. She lay prone behind the Barrett, cheek pressed to the cool metal, heartbeat sinking with the thunder in her hands. Her breath slowed, the chaos fading into a distant hum as the world narrowed to crosshairs and a black dot screaming toward her. She squeezed the trigger, and the Barrett answered with a roar that shook the sky, a concussive blast that kicked like a mule, but she rode it like a storm tamer. The .50 caliber round left the barrel like a lightning bolt punching through. The drone's fuselage in a shower of sparks and hydraulic blood. The explosion bloomed mid-air, a fireball that scattered smoking shards across the sky. Gasps rippled behind her, but Kara didn't hear them. She was already racking the next round, fingers moving with the speed and certainty of a god writing, death in thunder and flame. The second drone banked hard, strafing the range with a hail of steel teeth, and Kara fired before it could spit a second burst. The bullet carving a fiery halo through its wing, tearing the machine apart in a blossom of black smoke. The third came screaming in low, weaving like a serpent, but Kara was ice. She tracked, adjusted, exhaled, fired, and turned its dance into a funeral. By now the men were no longer laughing, no longer breathing. They crouched behind cover, staring at her like she wasn't human, but something forged from war itself. Shell casings clinked against steel like coins hitting a tomb. The fourth drone dived fast, a missile slung under its belly, glinting like a fang. But Kara's trigger finger spoke first, and the missile never kissed the earth because its mother died in fire before it could let go. The fifth came screaming vengeance, ripping the air into ribbons, and Kara's bullet met it head-on, ripping its core apart in a pyre of shrapnel that rained like black snow. Smoke clawed at the sky, heat rolled off the deck, and Kara didn't even blink. But then came the sixth, the beast, the monster drone, bigger than the rest, bristling with guns like a floating fortress, engines howling as it hurtled straight for the Admiral. He lay broken on the steel, clutching his mangled wrist, eyes wide, face pale as a ghost, staring down Judgment Day. Soldiers screamed for him to move, but fear rooted him like iron. The drone dropped low, cannons glowing hell red, seconds from tearing him into meat, and Kara fired. The Barrett roared one last time, a sound that split the heavens, and the bullet flew like fate unleashed. It hit the beast dead center, and the world exploded. Fire engulfed the sky, a storm of molten steel and broken wings raining down as the shockwave slammed across the deck, shoving men to their knees. Silence fell, thick, stunned, absolute. 6 drones, 6 shots, no misses. Kara rose from the smoke like a wraith, slinging the Barrett over her shoulder, boots crunching on hot brass as she walked through the graveyard of shattered steel. She didn't look at the men. She didn't look at the Admiral. She didn't need to. Every soul on that range knew the truth carved into their bones. She wasn't one of them. She was above them. And as the Admiral's gaze burned into her back, hatred and humiliation boiling like poison, Kara whispered under her breath, a vow only the wind heard. "Hands off my rifle, or next time it won't be your wrist." Hours later, the heat had died. But the storm hadn't. Not the one on the range, and definitely not the one behind those closed steel doors in the command tent. The room smelled of gun oil and sweat, thick with the electric tension of too many men trying to swallow their pride in the presence of the woman who had just rewritten the rules of war. Kara stood tall, uniform dusted with smoke and brass stains, hair loose now from the violent ballet of battle, strands framing a face that was all angles and steel. Around her, A circle of brass sat stiff in their chairs. Rows of stars and ribbons glittering like constellations of old power. Their jaws, clenched so hard you could hear enamel crack. At the head of the table sat General Marcus Hale, a man carved from stone and storms, eyes sharp as bayonets, his silence louder than any explosion Kara had faced. For a heartbeat that felt like a lifetime, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the AC and the faint buzz of Kara's pulse pounding in her ears. She had walked in expecting a court-martial, maybe a demotion, maybe worse. She had snapped the wrist of an admiral on live ground and turned a training range into a graveyard of drones. That didn't go unnoticed. The silence stretched, a taut wire ready to snap. Then Hale leaned forward, his voice a blade cutting through the air. "Promote her." Gasps detonated like grenades. The Admiral, his arm swaddled in bandages, face pale and lips curled in venom, jerked upright. "What?" His voice cracked like a whip, laced with fury and disbelief. "She assaulted a superior officer. She—" Hale's gaze sliced to him, cold enough to freeze fire. "She saved your life. 6 drones, 6 kills. You'd be a scorch." Mark, if not for her trigger finger. That's not insubordination, that's survival, that's war. The room fell silent again, the kind of silence that ends arguments before they start. The Admiral swallowed his rage like glass, blood in his throat. But he didn't speak. He couldn't. Hale turned back to Kara, eyes softening just enough to let a ghost of respect slip through. "Effective immediately," he said, voice ringing. Like a verdict, Lieutenant Reynolds is promoted to Commander, Special Weapons Division. The words hit the room like artillery, shattering every barrier, every doubt, every whisper that had haunted Kara since day one. But she didn't smile. She didn't even blink. Because this wasn't victory. Not yet. Victory didn't come with stripes or stars. Victory came with silence. The silence of the men who once laughed, now choking on their pride. She saluted, crisp and sharp, then turned to leave, boots echoing like gunshots on steel. But the war wasn't done with her, not by a long shot. When she reached her quarters, a man in black waited at her door, a shadow with no name, holding a folder stamped classified in red so deep it looked like blood. He handed it to her without a word and vanished into the hall like smoke. Inside, 6 words stared back at her, cold as the void. Neutralize 6 high-value targets. Covert. Below that, a signature that could start wars, and an operational name that sent ice through her veins. Operation Silent Vengeance. Kara's hands tightened on the paper, the weight of destiny pressing into her bones. 6 targets, 6 shots. Just like today, but this time, the world wouldn't see. She closed the folder, eyes lifting to the mirror where a stranger stared back. A woman forged from steel and fire, a hunter reborn. Her lips curled into the ghost of a smile, a whisper sliding from her throat like smoke curling from a barrel. "Hands off my rifle." And if anyone thought today was the end, they were dead wrong, because the next chapter wasn't going to be written in ink. It would be written in blood.